Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Come on in. Take your seats. Don't be shy. There's lots of room. It's the best conversation of the day. So get comfortable. Very excited to be sitting down with Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who's backstage fueling up on some coffee. My name's Luiza Savage. I'm Editorial Director of WP Intelligence, and you're like, what is that? And that is a new professional analysis, research, and executive membership service from the Washington Post. And we cover topics like energy and climate, global security, AI and technology, and healthcare. So we are absolutely thrilled and honored to be a media partner of the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Forum this week, and you may have seen us out doing some interviews in the hall. But I am particularly honored to be here with Senator Cassidy. I feel an enormous amount of pressure sitting here. I've been nervous about this all day.
No way, I don't believe that.
Let me tell
Never
you,
trust another word she says.
Listen, every person I've talked to here at this conference, and I'm told by Fred Kemp that there are 1,835 of you, they're all saying, oh, great, he's unleashed. He can speak his mind. He can really tell us what's what. So that is the expectation, and we're, gosh darn it, going to meet it. Everyone's super interested in what you think about Iran. You broke with the White House to, rein in the president's powers to prosecute this war. Now we have new skirmishes happening. We thought we had a ceasefire. Just had new numbers out today. Inflation hitting 4.2%, largely, I think, because of energy prices. Can the strait be reopened? What do you think should happen now? You've been an Iran watcher for a long time.
So first, as regards my position on the war with Iran, I agree with the president's goals. Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. They should not have a ballistic missile to deliver it, and we need to degrade their conventional weapons. And when we went in, he said, based, I presume, on intelligence, that would be out in 4 to 5 weeks. Now we're 4 to 5 months, and inflation is at 4.2%. It's hurting the average family in my state around the world, around the country, but also around the world. So I think the president needs to be more forthcoming, and I think Congress should have a role. The American people need to hear what's happening. So when they say end the war, no, I'm actually saying, Mr. President, Congress must weigh in. That is our responsibility here. That's number one. And what do we do about it? I don't know if we can reopen the strait. I am confident the president is doing whatever he can to do so. But what we have to do is mitigate the economic harm and the geopolitical damage to both the United States and to our allies. If there's a theme of what I'm saying today, these are all intimately involved. And so the degree to which we can, the United States, encourage our manufacturers to take every drop of oil out of a barrel of oil and put it to transportation, that's good. And for those other things that barrel of oil is used, maybe backfill with natural gas, which we have a lot of, and the price at Henry Hub is remaining stable, to make those products with natural gas. If we really think it's going to be longer term, the degree to which we can align federal, state, and local incentives so that things like garbage trucks, school buses, and city buses are running on compressed natural gas instead of oil, gas, and diesel, that creates more supply for everyone else. It's not an easy situation. So we have to think both short-term, intermediate, and long-term, and probably we need to be doing that. That's why I think Congress needs to weigh in.
Mm-hmm. Well, just staying with Iran for a minute, I was speaking with our host, Fred Kemp, the CEO of the Atlantic Council, just a little while ago, and I was asking him, what are you hearing from all these leaders that you've brought together? And he said, well, they're really in two camps. There are those who say it's time for the U.S. to cut its losses and just make a deal on the strait and move on. And he's also hearing from people who say, no, this is really the time for strategic patience. Iran's on its back foot. Its proxies are down. How do you weigh that? Do you think there's more urgency to get a deal, or is this the chance to get the deal?
You can't leave Iran stronger than when they started, and you cannot leave our allies weaker than when we started. That's the kind of contingency here. You got to make sure Iran is weaker and our allies are stronger. That's number one. But number two, we're speaking without the advantage of intelligence. It is clear that between the United States and Israel, we are listening to conversations of the average Iranian and the member of their leadership, we're listening to those. You and I don't have the benefit of that conversation. And we should be able to gauge kind of what direction to go as to where that tipping point is. And so, not to duck your question, but just to say, right now we're offering opinions, but that opinion would be much better off if it were fully informed, as the administration theoretically is.
There's been some frustration at the White House about the reaction of European allies, that they're not stepping up more, given that they have a lot at stake in the Strait. But you also mentioned damage to our allies and our relationships. What are you hearing from our allies?
Well, I don't know if I have to necessarily hear from allies as to know natural, normal human relations. The president has humiliated some of our allies. When you're humiliated, you're less likely to cooperate at a future endeavor. Whenever somebody says, like, well, wouldn't it be great if they just did this? And I'm thinking, guy, are you married? I mean, like, if you went up to your wife and you, like, were just yelled at her, and then right after that said, hey, baby, I love you, she's going to say, you know what I'm saying? So now we're asking them to commit large sums of money, potential political unrest at home. Why? Because the guy who's been bullying them now beckons them to join on something he didn't inform them of beforehand. That's just not the way you run a country.
So what are your thoughts now as you look at your sort of home stretch here in the Senate about the role of the institution in foreign affairs at this moment? I mean, it's I'm sure a lot of allies are trying to figure out how to even begin to deal with this very unpredictable foreign policy coming out of the U.S. What should the Senate's role be, and what can senators do?
So I've been advocating, started working on this 8 years ago, something called the foreign emissions fee. And in the foreign emissions fee, it's my observation that if you're talking about national security, economic security, it is so intimately involved with energy policy and with environmental standards, so much so that if you focus on one and do not pay attention to the other three, you don't get the one you're focused on. And that's been my advocacy for the last 8 years, and I can truly say that now people now understand that. And that has become part of the conversation. I wrote an article for Foreign Affairs a few years ago, and recently someone whom I respect greatly basically quoted my article mentioning those 4 things. So it tells me that the conversation now understands that. So if you will, what's the role for Congress? If we come up with a trade policy which recognizes that if China is arbitraging environmental standards to lower their cost of production, to incentivize businesses and manufacturers to move to China, and they use that economic growth to fuel their military rise, and by the way, fuel their economy with coal, but the SOx and NOx from coal floats over the Pacific and lands on California, we got a problem. The way to address that is to say, wait a second, China, my foreign emissions fee, you're going to pay a fee roughly equal to the avoided cost of controlling emissions, okay? And that fee, you're either going to buy a lot more natural gas, which improves our economy, but increases your cost of production, or you're going to turn on your scrubbers, which is going to increase your cost of production. But either way, we're going to level the playing field. Now manufacturers are incentivized to stay here with our cheap natural gas, and that improves our economic security. It weakens them because their economy is weaker, but our stronger economy increases our national security. We can do this because of an energy policy that we've developed. And by the way, the whole thing that ties us together is paying attention to environmental standards. You do those 4, you achieve it. If we combine with the Europeans, trade policy, they want a CBAM, we would have the foreign emissions fee. Now we have Team West, our Team Western values. Throw in the Aussies, the Japanese, the South Koreans, et cetera. If the Chinese want to, or another country, import to any of those countries, they would face the same situation. Team West, team democracy, team freedom grows, and those who wage war against team freedom shrink. That's the goal of my foreign emissions fee, and that could be the product of Congress.
So is this going to be your focus now for the rest of your term?
It'll be one of my foci. My wife will tell you my ADD sometimes goes, but that will be my principal energy policy that I will push. I will note that 8 years ago, this was kind of like, what? And now, aside from my article being quoted, the administration just released an RFI last week asking stakeholders for input on how to measure the carbon intensity of certain products in anticipation of having to address a CBAM, a carbon border adjustment mechanism. We have made progress, and people understand that these four together give us a geopolitical tool that's based upon our strength, that makes us stronger yet, but also, relatively speaking, weakens our geopolitical opponents.
Yeah. So if the foreign emissions fee was enacted tomorrow, which industry would feel the biggest impact first? And what would it mean for the oil and gas industry and oil and gas flows in and out of these?
So the covered entities, and if my staffer were here, she'd be kicking me to make sure I get them right. But it would be aluminum, steel, solar panels, hydrogen, glass. I'm leaving something out. Fertilizer, I think. I think I'm leaving one more out. And so we don't cover refined products. But that said, think about what we already invest in terms of controlling emissions. And think about our advantage with natural gas. One thing I point out to people, and they never believe me, but it's true. In absolute amounts, the emissions generated by the US economy is lower now than it is in 1995. Despite a bigger economy, more people, more manufacturing, more oil and gas development in absolute amounts. Absolute, not per capita. Absolutes, we have less emissions now than we did way back then. Why? Because we have substituted natural gas for coal. And the energy content per unit of emission, so much is beneficial in the sake of natural gas. That's our built-in advantage. So let's take advantage of it.
Well, so obviously this policy is aimed largely at China.
No. But they're the easiest one for people to understand.
Okay. Well, what would it mean for, you mentioned Europe.
Oh, by the way, and to finish with natural gas and the oil and gas industry, they would be producing a lot more natural gas and shipping a lot more natural gas, because around the world there'd be a movement to natural gas and probably more consumption here too.
But what would it mean for other allies who would now face this, essentially another form of a potential tariff? How could they navigate this additional layer of complexity?
Think about Team Freedom. Team Freedom includes the EU. The EU is now putting together a carbon border adjustment mechanism. You could meld those two together. You could absolutely meld those two together. And so there'd be relatively unrestricted trade between our allies, Japan, Australia, UK, et cetera, relatively unrestricted trade. But imagine if they do a CBAM and we don't. China's going to ship all kinds of stuff here. We're just going to be their dumping ground. And if we do a foreign emission fee and they don't, China's going to redirect there. So I think, if you want to get big things done for Team Freedom, you got to have good working relationships with allies. You really do, particularly when confronted with someone so capable as China. And I think, Luiza, that we've got to have that working relationship with our Western and Western-like allies, team democracy, if we're going to confront these four issues that I said before.
But what's your assessment of those allied relationships now, a year into this administration, which has been so characterized by tariffs and various
it's obviously
discord
not good.
Yeah.
So, but I think that this sort of policy would give a chance to rebuild. And so.
Do you think there's a permanent damage to the relationship? You hear countries talking about diversifying away from the United States.
Yeah, this administration's got 2 more years. So it depends on who the next administration is. And so, that's just that is to be discovered.
Well, one other major area that the Senate plays a big role in is permitting reform, and this is something that industries across the energy spectrum, whether you're talking about renewables, whether you're talking about oil and gas pipelines, whether you're talking about building data centers. I mean, you cannot have a conversation right now in this country about energy without talking about permitting reform. What is it going to take to get this done? When will there be permitting reform? Is there more urgency around it now that we're suddenly facing this growing energy demand that needs to be met?
Working backwards, yes, I think there is more urgency. I think there's been a lot of bipartisan work. I say bipartisan, it's going to take 60 votes to pass it, so you've got to get both sides bought in. Both sides have seen that going it alone by executive order, when my guy is the president, to have it reversed by the next guy who's in the other party who decides that he wants to do it a different way, is not the way to run a country. That we've got to have congressional input on how to do the permitting reform that is fair to all. You may not disagree, you may disagree with the project, but if it was done and permitted correctly, it should go forward. And then the permitting itself should be done in such a way so that it is a neutral broker. And I think we're making progress, and when I speak to my Democrat and Republican colleagues working on this, they are cautiously optimistic.
What evidence do you see of progress? Like,
well, just personal conversation with the principals, and they are optimistic.
but where do you see that opportunity to? Are there issues that people are coming closer together?
Yeah. It takes a while for people to kind of get off of established sort of this is my feelings and I'm not going to give up on it. To okay, I can give up on this if I get that. And now I see what you're saying. Going back to marriage, my wife and I used to have fights. No, we never had fights. But let's just say that occasionally we had disagreements. And it turns out, once we understood what we were speaking about, the different definitions of what we were discussing, we no longer had the disagreement. So sometimes when, believe it or not, when Democrats and Republicans speak, we use different definitions, or there's different button words. So it takes a while to kind of work through that. Wait a second, I know what you're saying. I can't go there, but could you go here? And this is what I'm really trying to say. Oh yeah, I can do that.
Well, one area that you've been pushing on is the sort of post-permit litigation challenges that come up. How do you? And I totally understand like these timelines get really long because you have people challenging them in court over and over again. But how do you limit that and still allow communities to have their say, to raise their objections, and to make sure that the law is being followed?
It should be a community. It should not be an NGO who does. An NGO should not have standing. It should be somebody from the community. That's number one. And right now, people who don't actually have a relationship beyond being an NGO well-funded by somebody who wishes to oppose the project can file, say, off just before, like in Alaska, you can only drill certain times of the year, so they wait to file their lawsuit just before that time of the year began, and then it would work through, get dismissed, and then just before the next year's construction weather became permittable, they would file another lawsuit. So it's a lawfare strategy, and that's not fair to people who are looking for the economic opportunity, the jobs, as well as for the people who are putting all the money into the permitting. And just to put a point on this, I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There was a young man who I went to Sunday school with named Thor. His father was a pipe fitter, and I remember being struck. I was probably 10 years old. His father left Louisiana to go work on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline as a pipe fitter. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about jobs that really pay a great wage, contribute to someone's pension, gives them lifelong security, and it's being tied up by somebody with an ideological objection. That's not right for that family, sending somebody across the country to make a better living. And we've got to keep a focus on that family.
Well, one thing in our final minute here on permitting reform, one prediction I hear a lot is, well, we won't get it before the midterms, but maybe in the lame duck session after the midterms. If you had to, put a percentage on the chance likelihood that would happen, more than 50%?
It's hard for me to comment on that because I'm not in the middle of that negotiation. I've got stuff that I'm trying to get in there. I have my own stuff I'd like to do post-midterm. But I hope that post-midterm is incredibly productive. It's important to our country that we get some stuff through Congress.
So give me your top 3 priorities for post-midterm.
I'm trying to do a Social Security reform, which whenever you say that, people kind of pat you on the back and they smile. But we have a bipartisan group of senators and people in the House, bipartisan, who are interested in doing this. It's a way to fix Social Security without cutting benefits and without cutting taxes to the senior citizen, but it builds upon what the federal government has already done in the Federal Railroad Retirement System. That would be number 1. We've got a health care bill that would promote things like price transparency so that the mom taking her child to the urgent care center would know that this one's going to cost her $500 and this one's going to cost her $50. She should have the power of knowing that. And so I'm also pushing that. That is something for my middle-class mom who needs it desperately right now. And of course, our foreign emissions fee.
And what is your biggest post-Senate priority?
So right now, earn a living. Whoa, baby, I don't have a paycheck, but I will get one. But it's been gratifying because I've had some people call me about my foreign emissions fee who would like me to come speak about the foreign emissions fee. I'm known as a healthcare guy. I'm a gastroenterologist. But it's achieved enough attention that they would like me to come speak about that on a geopolitical, on an environmental, on an energy policy, et cetera. And so I really want to pursue that. And then I want to be involved in healthcare policy. It's 20% of our nation's economy, and I feel like I've already added to the conversation. I'd like to add some more.
Well, you all heard that. The senator's looking for speaking gigs on the foreign emissions fees, so hit him up after the panel. Senator, such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Don't forget your phone.
Thank you.
All right.